Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome to another Christmas movie review. Yeah, I'm doing two videos in one day. Get over it. But today's Christmas movie I'm going to be reviewing is the 1983 beloved Christmas classic, A Christmas Story, directed by Bob Clark, starring Darren McGavin and Peter Billingsley. So yeah. Anyways, what is the plot to this movie? Well, the plot of this movie is as follows. It is a rather simple plot. All Ralphie wants is a Red Ryder BB gun. The problem is convincing his parents. Peter Billingsley, Darren McGavin, and Melinda Dillon in a funny, nostalgic triple dog dare delight. That's basically just a plot synopsis of what it is. And Ralphie is the kid that you see right here on the cover, and this is one of my personal favorite Christmas movies, and I own it in this 4-movie collection. I bought this at Walmart a few years ago. I think I only paid like about $20 for all 4 of these movies, so not a bad deal. But yeah, this has always been one of my favorites, and I mainly I did own the other movies. Really the only reason I bought this was because I liked the movie Elf, and until that point, I did not have Elf on DVD, so that's mainly the reason I got this collection. But yeah, you can't go wrong with this movie, A Christmas Story, at least the way I look at it. But so, anyways, I already listed the plot, and so, anyways, how was this movie received? Well, when this movie was released on November 17th, 1983 in the U.S., it did. Now it's weird. Now the movie itself. When this movie came out, it did receive positive reviews from critics and audiences, but it didn't do well at the box office when it initially came out due to poor marketing. But as soon as the movie went to VHS tape and was playing on cable TV back in the 80s, then it became a really huge hit, and nowadays is considered one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time, and I definitely agree with that, and so, and now, how I was first introduced to this movie, I was around 8 years old, yeah, around that age when I first saw this movie, when my dad showed it to me in 2011, and this has been one of my favorite movies in general ever since then. I absolutely love this movie, but, and now, Bob Clark, at this point, he was a well-known director. He had done the 1981 comedy Porky's, which I do rather like that movie, but although that one was more mixed reception by critics, but this movie was a really huge hit, and this is what really put Bob Clark on the map as a director. In fact, many people would say this is his best movie, which I would agree with, but yeah, without further ado, let's get into the review. So, the movie starts off where we are now, what's interesting about this movie is how the main character of the movie is an 8-year-old kid by the name of Ralphie, but throughout the course of the movie, we hear the voice of an adult Ralphie as the narrator, narrating how his Christmas was when he was 8 years old throughout the course of the movie. So that was a rather interesting approach to it. But like I said, the movie starts off with him narrating on how him and everyone else is excited for Christmas and all that stuff. And like I said, we're introduced to the main character, Ralphie, who is played by Peter Billingsley, and his brother, Randy, who is played by Ian Petrella, I think that's how you say the actor's name, but yeah, like I said at the beginning, we're introduced to Randy and Ralphie, and Ralphie narrates at the beginning of the movie that he basically wanted a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas, as it was like, it was his dream Christmas present. But of course, again, there is the problem of trying to convince his parents, because the mom, is not so keen on the idea of an 8-year-old having a BB gun. But this is a really funny movie. Like I said, we get that whole monologue out the way, and then Ralphie's mom, who is played by Melinda Dilton, basically yells, Ralphie, Randy, you better be downstairs in 2 minutes. And I mean 2 minutes. And then, Ralph and Randy goes to the dresser to get his clothes, and Ralphie pushes him aside. He's like, oh, come on, I was here first and stuff like that. So then Randy and Ralphie basically, get their stuff ready. And then, this is one of my favorite parts of the movie. I love the part at the beginning of the movie when Ralphie, he, like I said, he wanted the Red Ryder BB gun, but there was an ad for it. So his mom was into magazines. So I love the part when Ralphie narrates, my mom was into magazines. And while he is narrating this, he puts the slip of the Red Ryder BB gun ad inside his mom's magazine. And he says, little does she know she'd be tricked into reading a Red Ryder sales bitch. Like, I thought that scene was absolutely funny, especially for a kid's movie, because this is rated PG. But, like this movie isn't afraid to, use language at points, and this is a kid's movie. And then, not long after that, in the morning, Ralphie and Randy are getting ready. And then, of course, there's the whole part where Ralphie's mom asks him what he wants for Christmas. And the adult version of Ralphie narrates, I just blurted it out. And then we hear Ralphie, the kid version, say, I want a Red Ryder BB gun. And the mom's like, no, you'll shoot your eye out. And then the adult Ralphie narrates, oh no, shoot your eye out, the classic saying. And then Ralphie says to her, I was just kidding, Mom. But I know Flick is getting one for Christmas and stuff like that. And then I love the part when Ralphie's narrating, this is a little before then, but his mom says, you two are running late for school and stuff like that. So what happens is that Randy, Ralphie, the main character of the movie, narrates getting ready for school was like deep sea diving. And then I love the part when the mother literally dresses Randy in like 3 layers of clothes, and Randy's like has a muffled scream under a scarf. And then I love the part when Ralphie narrates, he looks like a tick about ready to pop. And then the mom's like, what is it? And then I love the part when she unwraps Randy's mouth with the scarf, and Randy's like, I can't put my arms down. And then she tries putting them down, and they keep coming back up. And then she's like, well, put your arms down when you get to school. And then she wraps the scarf around his face after. I thought that scene was funny. And then, of course, there's the whole scene where Ralphie, his friend Schwartz, and Flick are basically walking on their way to school. And Schwartz and Flick basically says to Schwartz, I asked my dad. He says the ton will stick right to that pole and stuff like that. And, while Randy and his brother Ralphie are on the way to school, Randy is behind, and he's like, come on, guys, wait up. And these people bump into him, knocking him over. And Randy's like, I can't get out. I can't get up. Hey. And then so Ralphie has to go help his brother get up and stuff like that. And again, I thought that Ralphie was a rather good character, played very well by Peter Billingsley. Now, I'm not too familiar with Peter Billingsley as an actor. Of course, I recognize him as the lead kid in this movie. And, of course, the sequel movie that HBO Max did to this 3 years ago called A Christmas Story Christmas, which not quite as good as this movie, but I thought that was a pretty good legacy sequel. I will be reviewing that this Christmas. But, anyways, getting back to this review, so then we cut to a part where, of course, Ralphie and his friends are on the way to school and stuff like that, and basically Ralphie and all the kids are assigned a project where they're basically assigned homework, and the teacher says the theme of today is you have to write what I want for Christmas. And of course they have a deadline like all homework at school does, and Ralphie is picturing how him writing that his essay is gonna go. And then later that night Ralphie he does the homework as assigned, of course, and he says, I don't think football's, and he says, I want a Red Ryder BB gun for Christmas. I think Red Ryder BB guns is a wonderful present. I don't think football is that good of a present, which I thought was pretty funny. And also another part about this movie I really like, when Ralphie and his friends are on the way home from school, we're introduced to this bully by the name of Scott Fargus and Grover Dill. And Scott Fargus is played by Zach Ward, who I know I've seen. I'm not too familiar with as an actor, like, and that's weird because it's like I know I've seen him in other stuff before, but I can't put my finger around at the moment of what else he was in. But I thought that but I will say Zach Ward did give a very good performance as this bully. And again, this movie just overall has a really good cast. I mean, this is all the cast. You got Moena Dillon as the mother. You got Darren McGavin as Ralphie's dad. You got Ralphie played by Peter Billingsley. You got Ian Petrella as Randy. You got Scott Schwartz as Flick. You got R.D. Robb as Schwartz. You got Tadil Moore played by Miss Shields, played by Tadil Moore. You got Grover Dill played by Yobo Anala. You got, again, Zach Ward as Scott Farris. You got Jeff Gillen as Santa, who doesn't show up till way later in the movie, but he's in there. You got Colin Fox as Maine the Merrilist. You got the Christmas Tree Man played by Les Carlson. You got the Fright Man played by Jim Hunter, and the Head Elf played by Patty Johnson. So this movie, this movie's got a big cast, and I think all the actors do a really good job in this movie. And again, I think that the humor is rather funny in this movie. I especially love the part when Ralphie's dad, early on in the movie, he basically won in a major award, and while this is happening, okay, so a little before the major award comes in, there's a very funny part where Randy's playing with his food at the table. He's not going to eat it, and I love the part when Randy's mom says, "Don't play with your food, eat it," and Randy's like, "Ugh." And then I love the part when the dad, played by Darren McGavin, says, "You stop that crying, or I'll give you something to cry about," And another thing I will say I do like about this movie, despite the fact that this movie was made in the 1980s, it takes place in the 1940s. And one thing I will give Bob Clark credit as a director for, now, I know this is based on a book. I forget the name of the book. I know the book has a different title than this movie, though. So how close this is to the book, I can't say. But one thing I do like is I like how this movie was able to capture the aesthetic of the 1940s. I thought that Bob Clark did a rather good job with the time period aesthetic. And this is just a movie that puts you in a good mood. And then, of course, there's the whole iconic scene in the movie where Ralphie and his friends go outside during recess, and while this is going on, of course, we got Ralphie, his friend Flick, and Schwartz. And this right here is my favorite scene of the movie. Well, my second favorite scene of the movie, but it's the scene where Schwartz is basically daring Flick to stick his tongue to the flagpole, and he's like, and then I love the part when he's like, "Stick my tongue to that flagpole, that's dumb." And then I love the part when Schwartz says, "That's because it'll stick." And then he's like, "Oh yeah," and the other kid's like, "Yeah." And then Schwartz basically says, why double dog dare you?" And then I love the part when he's still refusing, and then the kid says, "I triple dog dare you." And then Ralphie just has like a look of shock on his face. And Ralphie says, the adult version of Ralphie's narrating, and his lips curled. There was no going back now. And then, of course, there's the whole part where Flick sticks his tongue to the pole, and then he's screaming like a little girl, and then everyone runs away. And then he was like, "What do we do?" And then and then all the kids are running away and stuff like that. Even the bully, one of the bullies is just like, one of the tall students is looking at it like in shock. And then the bell rings, so all the kids run inside, and then the kids screaming, "Come back!" And then there's the whole scene where Flick is like, what do we do? And Ralphie's like, I don't know, the bell rang. And then all the kids just leave him. I'm like, that is such a jerk move, but at the same time, I understand why they did it. And then, of course, there's the whole scene where all the kids are in the classroom except Flick, and the teacher basically asks, where's Flick? And then the adult version of Ralphie, who's narrating this story, because again, Ralphie is a kid in this movie, but the adult version of Ralphie is narrating his story from when he was 8 years old. And I love the part when the teacher says, where's Flick? And then Ralphie narrates, Flick who? And then I love the part when she's like, I said, has anybody seen Flick? And then one of the students raises her hand and points outside. And then the teacher looks and she's like, oh my God. Like, just, that scene right there is very funny. Like, that scene right there, the whole scene where the teacher just has that absolute shocked look on her face is absolutely hilarious. Good stuff. And then, of course, like I said, of course, the bully, Scott Fargus, and Grover Dill are very iconic characters in the movie. They're really good bullies. I especially love the part when Ralphie and his friends first come across him, and Ralphie's narrating, Scott Fargus, what a rotten name. He had white, and he says he had yellow eyes and stuff like that, and then all the kids run away. And then, of course, there's the whole scene where Scott Fargus and his friend Grover Dill are, bullying, of course, Flick. And then the bully, Scott Fargus, says, say uncle. And then the kid's screaming uncle. And he's like, louder, uncle, and stuff like that. And then, and then everyone's able to get home. And then I love the part when the bully scared the kids home. And then they're laughing at each other. And then I love the part when Grover Dill gives him a little punch in the arm, and then both of them laugh. And then I love the part right after that when Scott Fargus punches his friend, and then his friend punches him in the arm, and then he punches Grover Dill in the arm really hard, showing that he's not happy about it. He's like, ow, man, and then they both walk home. But anyways, getting back to the whole part I was talking about with the major award, basically, the dad, of course, gets, even if you haven't seen this movie, this is a well-known, iconic part of the movie, he gets a Christmas lamp. And not just any Christmas lamp. It is a lamp that looks like a woman's leg. And then, I love the part when Ralphie's dad's about to unbox it, and he says, fragile, and then it must be Italian. And then the mother's like, I think that's fragile. And of course, this right here, this is after the scene where Randy was playing with his food, and then the mother said, show me how the piggies eat. And then there's the whole funny scene where Randy's just shoving all the food in his face on the plant and laughing like a little pig. And then the dad's like, ugh, with a disgusted look. And then he looks in his newspaper. That scene's really funny. And then, of course, there's the whole part where, where the dad unboxes it. He says, would you look at this? This is a lamp. And the mother's like, but what is it? And then the dad's like, whoa, it's a lamp. It, kind of like a statue. And Ralphie's like, yeah, a statue. And he rubs his hand on what looks like the leg of a woman. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, this movie's for kids, but it's like, despite the fact that this movie's for kids, it does have some good adult jokes in there that work both well for kids and adults. Like, this movie has the perfect balance of both. And then, of course, there's the whole scene where, the dad puts the leg lamp in front of the window, and then, the dad's standing outside, and then everyone's like, what is that? It's in a major award. I won it. And the guy's like, heck, you say you won it? And he says, this guy says he wants it and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's other great stuff in the movie. Like, for instance, there's the whole iconic scene where Ralphie, and his family go out to get a Christmas tree, and the car breaks down. So, Ralphie has to go, help the dad. And the mother suggests, hey, why don't you go help your dad? And Ralphie's like, okay. And Ralphie narrates, this was the first time I was ever asked to help my dad out with anything. And then the dad's like, what are you doing out here? And Ralphie's like, my mom said I should help. He's like, oh, okay. And then of course there's the whole scene where the dad basically, was making Ralphie hold like, kind of like a bowl, but like it's made out of metal and it has like nuts and bolts in it. And the dad accidentally knocks that out of his hand. And then there's the whole part where Ralphie's like, oh, fudge. But of course, there's the whole part where Ralphie says, oh, fudge. But then the adult version of Ralphie narrates, only I didn't say fudge. I said the I said the mother of all dirty words. The big one, the F dash 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 word. And then Ralphie's dad's like, what did you say? And he's like, that's what I thought you said. Go in the car. Come on. And then the adult version of Ralphie narrates, it was over. I was dead. And then I love the part when Ralphie's in the car sad. And then, Ralphie's dad is like, do you know what your son said? Oh, let me tell you. Ready? And then he whispers it in the mom's ear. And then the mom screams in the car, freaking out. She's like, Ralphie. And then Ralphie has to have a bar of soap in his mouth, which I got a funny story to tell about that. So when I was in 4th grade, now, this was not a smart move on my end, but this is a funny story. So, when I was in 4th grade, looking back, this was not the best move. But again, I was stupid back then, okay? But when I was in 4th grade, I thought, now, none of my students did this, but I don't know why I thought this, but for whatever reason, I called all of my classmates a-holes because I thought they were making fun of me when they weren't. And so because of that, I had to put a bar of soap in my mouth. But here's the thing. I was just laughing hysterically and the whole reason I was laughing hysterically was because I was thinking about the part in A Christmas Story when Ralphie had to do that. And then 20 minutes later, like the soap wasn't even on my tongue. Then my dad maybe put it there, and then I started gagging for 20 minutes straight. Just that right there, that's funny. Like, that's a story I always tell people. But anyways, getting back to the scene in question, Ralphie's mom's like, okay, where did you hear that word? And Ralphie narrates, now I had heard that word from my dad 20 times a day when he worked at a place, but I thought of a lie. I blurted out the first name that came to mind. And then Ralphie's like, Schwartz. And the mother's like, oh, I see. And then she puts the bar of soap back in his mouth. And then she decides to give Schwartz's mom a call on the phone. And this is one of my favorite scenes of the movie where Schwartz's mom, where Ralphie's mom calls Schwartz's mom. And she is like, do you know what Ralphie said? She was like, no. And then she whispers in the phone what she said. And then we hear Schwartz's mom on the phone saying, oh, no, not that, and stuff. No. We hear her say, no, not that. And then I love the part when Ralphie's mom's like, do you know where he heard it? She was like, no. And then I love the part when Ralphie's mom says, he heard it. He heard it from your son. And she's like, what? And we hear... She's like, what? And like, now I know I'm doing a terrible job in doing an impersonation of it, but she's like, what? On the end of the phone. And then I love the part when we hear her slap her son on the phone. He's like, oh no, mom, what did I do? And stuff like that. Just iconic stuff. And then I love the part when the mom tells her son to go to bed. She's like, don't you give me that look. You're gonna get it. As she was punishing him, and she's like, so no comic book reading. And then I love the part when Ralphie's mom, just out of curiosity, when no one's looking, puts the bar of soap in her mouth, and then she starts to gag, so then she decides to wash it out. I thought that scene was funny. And then, of course, there's a whole scene later on in the movie where Ralphie, played by Peter Billingsley, is at the school, and, basically what happens is the bully, this is much later in the movie, Scott Fargenson throws a snowball at him, and Scott Fargenson, as well as his bully friend, because they're both bullies, basically laugh at him, and he says, listen, jerk, when I tell you to run, you better run. And then Ralphie starts to tear up, and then he's like, oh, what, are you gonna cry? Come on now, cry. And then the adult version of Ralphie narrates, there was no going back now. And then, of course, he beats up Scott Fargus, and so bad to the point to where the mom basically escorts him away from the school. And also, I know this is a bit of a side tangent, but I forgot to mention this. The whole part where Ralphie had to put the soap in his mouth, like, during that whole ordeal, well, I never mind. Let's get back to the part I was talking about. Even though I've watched this movie thousands of times, I forgot what I was going to say. But anyways, getting back to the whole scene in particular, of course, there's the whole scene where Ralphie is fighting the bully, and he gets, and Ralphie's mom, brings Ralphie home, and then Ralphie's crying, and she's like, come on, we're going home. And then Ralphie's crying, she's like, it's okay, just calm down. And then she washes up Ralphie and stuff like that, and just tells him to go lie down for a while. And then, Ralphie was narrating, it was over for me. I was worried, terrified of my dad coming home that night, what he would do once I found out. And then, of course, there's the whole funny scene where Randy is underneath the table and stuff like that. And while this is going on, he's under the sink, but the mom opens up the cabinet. She's like, what are you doing under there? And then I love the part when Randy's crying. He's like, Daddy's gonna kill Ralphie. And she's like, no, he's not. And Randy's like, yes, he is. And the mother's like, no, I promise you, he's not gonna kill Ralphie. And she's like, do you want to come out? And then Randy shakes his head no. And she's like, you want some milk? And Randy shakes his head yes. So then he takes the milk then. And then Ralphie gets home, and then, Ralphie's dad gets home. Ralphie and all the family eat at the dinner table, and the mom tells Ralphie's dad that he had a fight at school. And the dad is like, oh, what type of fight? And she's like, oh, how boys are. And then after that, Ralphie narrates, I was relieved knowing my dad wasn't going to kill me, which I will admit was funny. And then not long after that, and another part I do like about the movie is one of my favorite sequences in this movie is when Ralphie, because you got to keep in mind this movie takes place in the 1940s. There were TVs, but they were very different, and most people couldn't afford them back then. So most of the time, people just listened to the radio. But in the movie, every night, every Friday night or something like that. The movie doesn't specify exactly what night, but basically Ralphie listens to his favorite radio program, and basically he ordered like this, I don't know how to describe it, kind of like a cipher key, like he ordered one in the mail, like for example, let's say the letter C were to have the letter B by it, and basically of course there's the whole iconic scene where Ralphie has a bunch of numbers written down, and as he was listening to the radio, because the radio basically read off a specific frequency of numbers, and then Ralphie goes to the bathroom so he could use his decoder to decode the message. And I love the part when Ralphie was narrating B, E, S, and then Be Sure To was the first part. And then, of course, while this is happening, because this is a family comedy and it's played up, for giggles and stuff, while this is going on, there is some very ominous music playing, and then Randy's crying, and the mom's like, we got to go. And then Ralphie's like, okay, Mom, I'll be right out. And then I love the part when he's like, be sure to what? And then the mother's yelling at Ralphie, we got to go. He's like, I'll be right out. And then, Ralphie narrates, the tension was terrible. What could this message be? The fate of the world the whole thing, I know he does a better job of it than me, but he says the fate of the world is in the balance and stuff like that. And then there's the whole dramatic music, which he's like, we gotta go. And then Ralphie's like, I'll be right out, for crying out loud. And then Ralphie narrates, she's almost there. I got the message. Yes, yes. And then Ralphie reads off, be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Ovaltine, a crummy commercial, son of a B word. Like, that scene right there is funny. And then, of course, closer to the end of the movie, Ralphie happens to go to visit Santa at the Christmas mall. And of course, like a dummy, he forgets what he wants for Christmas. And Santa's like, how about a football? And he's like, okay, get him out here. And the elf basically throws Ralphie down the slide, but Ralphie's able to crawl back up. He's like, no. He's like, I want a BB gun. And then I love the part when Santa's like, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. And then he just uses his boot to, just lightly, just gives a little tap with his boot. And, Ralphie goes down the slide. And then him and his parents go home. And then the next morning, Ralphie ends up, getting pretty much everything he wants for Christmas. But of course, there is the whole iconic funny scene where Ralphie gets a pink bunny suit. And he's like, Mom, I don't want to put it on. She's like, too bad. You're putting it on. But, and then Ralphie goes to put it on. And she's like, go put that suit on right now. Your aunt went to all that trouble to get it for you. Oh, wait a minute. I know this is a side tangent, but anyways, getting back to the whole soap thing, yeah. Remember how I said Ralphie, had the soap? Of course, there's the whole funny scene where Ralphie is daydreaming, where he's pretending to be blind, and the mother's like, what could we have done to leave you like this? And Ralphie was like, it was soap poisoning, and then the parents are crying, and then Ralphie winks at the camera when they're not looking. That part's funny, but I forgot to mention that, but let's get back to the part I was talking about. So, Ralphie ends up getting everything he wants for Christmas, and, he gets a BB gun, and, he shoots the BB gun, but it bounces off the target, knocking off his glasses. And then, so Ralphie decides to fake this. He pretends that an icicle hit the top of his glasses, and he got hurt. So, basically, he was able to trick his mother into thinking that, and she was like, you're lucky that thing didn't kill you. Those things have been known to kill people and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's the whole scene closer to the end of the movie where basically the next door neighbor has these dogs that always get into the house. In fact, there's a funny scene early on in the movie where the neighbor's dogs, one of its ears gets caught in the door. And then I love the part when the dad, played by Darren McGavin's like, serves you right, you smelly buggers, and then he closes the door. But anyways, getting back to the scene, basically the dogs destroyed the turkey, so the family has to go to a Chinese restaurant, to eat food for lunch and stuff like that. So they're at it, but they basically want the people to sing "Deck the Halls," fa la 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 la, but they do not understand of it. They go fra ra 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 ra. But then the guy in charge of voice is like, no, not rah, 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 fa, la, 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 la. And he's like, sing it after me. And then, of course, they sing the wrong thing again. And then there's the whole funny scene where they have a turkey cooked, but, like, the head of it's there. And then I love the part when the waiter of the food, just chops off the head of the turkey with a butcher knife, making the mom freak out. That scene's rather funny. And then the movie ends on a good note where Ralphie narrates, there I lay, peacefully in bed with my rifle next to me. And then, so yeah, the movie ends. So yeah, at the end of the day, I know this was a long review, but I had to get it off my chest. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I would highly recommend this if anyone who hasn't seen it, especially since it's December. And I'm going to give this movie a perfect 10 out of 10. So yeah. Anyways, guys, that was my review of A Christmas Story, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye now.